Welcome to another episode of Vulgarian Recommends. Today we are going to discuss Eternity and a Day from the Greek master director Theo Angelopoulos, or I like to say Theodoros, because that's his full name and I think it sounds so cool. But this is his Palme d'Or winning masterpiece. Although funny story about him is that he really wanted to win the Palme d'Or for his previous film Ulysses Gaze, and he thought that he should have won it, but he publicly said that, yeah, I should have won it, but I didn't. But then he won it for this one. So I guess he's a bit egoistical, but he's so good that he's allowed to be that way. And he tragically died in a traffic accident in 2012, I think, at the age of, was it like 77 or something like that? So, and he had planned to do a trilogy of films, but he only got to do the first one called Weeping Meadow, which is really good as well. So that's very sad. But he started in the early 70s, I believe, and I have watched again pretty much everything that he made. I think there are only a couple of short films that I haven't seen, but most of his films I've only seen once. But Eternity and a Day has been one of my favorites since I watched it for the first time, and now I have seen it 3 times. But I'll give a brief plot synopsis for this film. So it's about a middle-aged man who is a poet and an author, and he learns that he has a terminal illness and that he has to go to the hospital to take more tests. And he's very much at the end of his life. But he meets this young Albanian immigrant, and then for pretty much the whole movie, they kind of are together, and he tries to help this immigrant boy. Although in the end, it feels like the boy ends up helping the old guy more. But with that plot, there is also these kind of more fantasy elements where we see this middle-aged guy's kind of memories, for example, about his dead wife. We see a younger version of the wife because, again, she has been dead for, I mean, we don't know how long, but quite a long time, I think. So it's kind of a mix of fantasy, memory, and reality, and that's interesting thing about the film, and that kind of means also that there are various different themes in the film. There is the more political, realistic stuff, and then there is this more kind of fantasy type of stuff about like the idea of time and how time passes on, and then like those kind of existential themes as well. But yeah, I think it's a absolutely amazing film, very beautiful in all the ways that a film can be in terms of the music, the cinematography, and just the relatable, very universal themes. And this is the first Angelopoulos film that Altes has watched. I thought that this would be a good entry point into his filmography, although obviously it's hard to say with things like that because it's a very complex work. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about it and quite nervous too.
Definitely very excited to discuss this, and thank you for suggesting it. I'll just show, I mean, while it's out of print, Artificial Eye had a 3-volume Theo Angelopoulos sets with, I don't know if it's all his films, but I guess four in each, and this is just thin little case there, and a wonderful little scene from the film. So yeah, I'm very excited to discuss this film because I really enjoy these kinds of films that deal with life experience in a way that I I I I feel like it makes us aware of how we actually live in the world and in our minds, going through these doors between the present and the past, and we're dealing with multiple fronts at the same time. And I think this is one of the crowning achievements of this film. There are great films made in that tradition, but I think it's done so well, and it feels so poignant when you're going through this experience of this day in this individual's life.
Yeah. And I think again, if we discuss like who would we recommend this film to, I would say, of course, if you are a fan of the European and slow cinema art house directors like again Tarkovsky, Bellatar, people like that, because this film also has long takes and very methodical cinematography, although the takes aren't quite as long as they are in Satan Tango, for example, because
Mm.
I mean these takes there are slow zooms and things like that, and they go on for a bit, but they aren't like 15-minute long takes or anything like that. So the style is definitely also different to Tarkovsky and Bellatar, but I think if you like those types of directors, you would probably like Angelopoulos as well. And this film has that kind of hypnotic, dreamy element to it that you can find on Tarkovsky films as well. But again, like I said in the introduction, this kind of mixes that dreamy, hypnotic thing with more kind of realistic imagery as well, and kind of some more banal colors at times as well. And the film is kind of I would say, tonally, there are moments where it's very depressing and dark, but then there are moments when it makes you kind of feel good that you are alive, and it
Yeah.
makes you kind of positive and optimistic about life. And that's obviously how life is, that there are many beautiful moments, but then there are those
Mm.
downward spirals as well, those more depressing, dark moments as well. So this is a really beautiful exploration of life itself, you could say.
Yes, absolutely. I would I would fully agree with that. Yeah, definitely. If you're interested in slow cinema and also stories about reflection, especially like late life reflection or reflection during a time of challenge or illness, like in this case. So, and I also think that if someone uh, appreciates Bergman as well, I think you would appreciate this film. And I also felt that it's a interesting juxtaposition or opposition with kind of the works of Kaurismäki. So it's like if you want to see two very different approaches to kind of certain subject matter and themes, it's also interesting to kind of see them as opposites, but in a way discoursing on some similar things. So I think that would be also interesting for anyone who wants to go the other way, and maybe likes Kaurismäki's work and then wants to see a different approach to uh, certain subject matter.
Yeah, I also see some similarities between Angelopoulos and Kaurismäki. Even in the visuals, there are certain shots in Eternity and a Day that could be in a Kaurismäki
Yeah.
film, like the shot when, I mean, I guess we don't want to spoil it too much yet, but there's this moment where there are like these, when the main character has to pay these three men to get the child out of that
Yes.
building. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that shot kind of reminds me of Kaurismäki a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like yeah, and if you like that kind of what to a style where it seems verite, but there's actually like interesting surrealism, but the surrealism is like presented in a verite way. So it's those can be very interesting as well visually. It's very interesting visually, I think, as well.
And this film is now 27 years old, but it still feels like very
Yeah.
today and very
Yeah.
relevant. I mean, of course, the existential themes and those are kind of always relevant as long as there are humans in this planet, but the political themes about immigration and the kind of the police and the state and things like that are very relevant in the current age, both in like North
Yeah.
America and Europe and also elsewhere. So it feels like a very current film, even though it's almost 30 years old now. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And if someone is also interested in like stories about humanism and also like immigration stories, because I think Angelopoulos, you introduced to me when I made that my response to my own challenge for the 10 movies that remade me, and or in a hall or something where I was talking about immigrant stories, and then you said, well, if you're interested in like stories of immigration and cultural kind of contact and even conflict and stuff like that, you have to see the films of Angelopoulos. So it took me a good couple of years to get to it, but I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, yeah, he has a few films that tackle these themes. Not all of his films tackle it, but many of them do. But I think we could already go to the spoiler section.
Yeah.
So yeah, but again, this film can be a bit hard to find. I don't know whether it's currently like kind of officially streaming anywhere, and again, the DVDs are unfortunately out of print. And then I've also heard that Criterion, for example, has tried to license these films in the past, but there has been some issues that the Theo Angelopoulos Foundation or something, they won't allow it or something like that. So, but obviously those are always rumors, so it's hard to know exactly
Yeah.
what is going on behind the scenes. But
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just seeing the one film, I haven't even seen the other films, but yeah, just this film alone uh, definitely needs, an up-to-date scan and presentation, or at least be more widely available, whether it's through streaming or and whatnot. Because yeah, this is the only way. I was just lucky someone was selling their um, all three volumes together, and I was like, okay, I'm scooping that. So
and while I don't usually care at all about like awards and stuff, but I think this definitely deserved the Palme d'Or win at Cannes. So because it's one of the best films of the whole 90s, and probably all time as well. So, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, now we could go into the spoiler territory, and I think with this film we could maybe start with the aesthetics a little bit, because we sometimes kind of maybe skim through the aesthetics, but I think with this film and also the next film that we are going to talk about, it's worth it to talk about the aesthetics a little bit. So, like I said, obviously the cinematography is very methodical. There are these slow zooms and kind of slow camera movement going from like again left to right and right to left in a very kind of just very well thought out way, and kind of the editing is also very very well thought out. And this film has one of my favorite shots of all time, and that's when they are at the border and we see the fence, and the people are at the
yes,
fence. Like that's such a haunting shot, and
yes,
that's kind of what has always blown me away about this movie. That is such a powerful scene, and probably something that we can maybe analyze a little bit on later on as well. But there are also these kind of more brighter scenes that are really beautiful looking, like of the sea, for example, and like the ending when it's all kind of happy in a way with his memories, and we see his wife and stuff. It looks like really beautiful and hypnotic. But then there are those really dark gray brownish scenes that really show us the, you could say, the political reality of this world that is pretty dark, that how these immigrants have to live in such a awful way, and again the police are everywhere and everything like that. So it's an interesting mix in that way.
absolutely. I think yes, stylistically, there's a lot, a lot going on and a lot done to make this film tell its story and have the impact it has, right? Like, so, as you're mentioning some of these as well, like uh there's a lot of I would say like opposition, and I think that's interesting in this film stylistically, how they've managed to make the two work together, because there's a kind of sparseness. Some of the scenes, there's this sparseness, there's this almost minimalism, and then there are scenes that you're taking in like a kind of a inside actually a city town, so with traffic and all that, and how you can create lingering feelings through the two. Like they almost overlap. And I think like this shot that I showed in the DVD is so telling for the stylistic thing, like how they've done this almost Rothko-esque, the sky or the ocean, and then the sand. It's this split, um, and he's in between, heavens and the earth, and then the stylistically you can see that a lot of like great choices and stuff, like you said, like in colors and all that, because you're taking the same, um, sometimes one how do you even describe this movie, because it's like it reminds me a lot of like Wild Strawberries, because he's going in and out, in and out, in and out. But you take one moment and there's this, he's remembering, and then there's a joyful moment going on. But I want to talk about the style. So the style of having, taking certain shots in certain places with getting certain colors, and then introducing a sparseness, like that kind of melancholy feeling where you feel, you're in that moment and you can kind of feel that warmth of that moment, but now you're away from it and you're removed from it, so you're also feeling the coldness of being removed from it. And they've done that, like you said, like very interestingly with kind of camera movements and color palettes, and also how you're staging uh, the shots, or the actions within the shot.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. Like when you said that it is quite minimalist and sparse in a way, but I would say at the same time it feels kind of so huge in scope
Mm,
that it's kind of weird how it kind of manages to mix those opposites together. That
yeah.
it feels big, but also kind of minimalist and sparse at the same time. And I think that visuals also really help us unpack the themes of the film. Like if you look at the sea, for example, it's kind of like the eternity. It's the
Mm,
big unknown that never ends, and we don't know what is there in the sea. And yeah, that's the sea kind of reminds us of the like the even the title of the film, that eternity and a day. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. That feeling of how, in a way, it almost feels like an epic in a sense. Because I was like watching this, and it's I don't it's probably it's an unrelated thought, but I was like, oh yeah, like when we are, I don't know, reading Homer or hearing, you know, Homer's like Iliad or Odyssey and whatnot, like this is the backdrop, like this is the land, and what does it mean to come from this land? Because they are also in their family moment, they're making these jokes about Clytemnestra and all this, and then you realize how much is going on in what appears to be this, in some ways, almost spacey type feeling. But there's a lot that he's mixing in, and like you said, it is an epic. It feels like an epic, this journey he's going through. It feels big, um, because it should be, right. It is his life, so it should feel that way. But yeah, we're talking about like stylistically how they've achieved that is really, it's really incredible. It's almost, it has that epic quality to it while it's a hugely personal film, and in some ways, yes, sociopolitically uh, motivated as well. And to bring those elements together and then to construct it, just in terms of pure aesthetics this way, it's just a really beautiful film. It just leaves you in awe, how beautiful it is as you're just sitting there going through that day with him.
Yeah, and you earlier mentioned that it has that kind of melancholic vibe to it, and of course that melancholic vibe really relates to the kind of sense of longing that we
Yeah.
have in the main character. And I think when you have a hypnotic cinematography, that kind of can really add to that sense of longing, because those kind of that stylistic choice and that emotion of longing, they just go really well together in cinema, I think. And there are many examples of cinema where I think those two things are um, combined, and I'm even some music. There are some music where those things are uh, added together. And by the way, again, I think I mentioned in the beginning, but the music in this film really again adds to these like emotions, this sense of longing and the melancholy and everything. Like it's just so
Hmm.
beautiful. I even saw on YouTube that there is like some live performance of it, so I need to watch that because it's such a great piece of music.
Absolutely, yeah. The music is great, and yeah, I just wanted to say because you said two things that are just very important, like few things actually, because you're talking about the sea and the symbolism of the sea, and you're right that you get that feeling of eternity because you can't see any land beyond, you just see the sea, and I think that's what took me into thinking about uh, the stories of historic Greece and thinking how people must have felt staring out at the sea that looks endless, and then how using the sea as symbolism of eternity also works in eternity in a day because it's like the sea is kind of ever present in your day. So your day-to-day life always has the eternity in there, and eternity always has to kind of in some ways is limited by the fact that your life is limited in a sense, but in your life there's always the eternity, like this kind of play going on. I don't think I'm explaining that well, so that's really uh like great to witness. And then the diversity, I think that's how they create the epic scale, because you see the parts of Greece, like you go from the beach and ocean, which a lot of people know Greece for, which is a great kind of beach, a place for great beaches and even partying and having these nice relaxing vacations. But with that you add something very functional like the ports, and then you're going all the way into the mountains and you're seeing snow. So seeing that diversity in landscape, uh, in one story in one day kind of almost creates this set of grandeur. It shows this distance, this is being covered emotionally and spiritually. And the music, absolutely. I mean, it starts kind of with the music, right, where he's playing it, and then he stops, and then neighbor starts playing it back to him, and the score is kind of interspersed throughout the film, and the the, the music goes a long way, like you said, to contribute to the overall feelings and like that the central character is going through, because he's also going through moments of weeping joy, right? Like, I'm so glad I experienced this, or I had this beauty in my life, but then, I didn't really pay enough attention to it while it was happening and all this. There's so much going on in this film.
And I think the sea also adds to the more political themes of the film because, of course, immigrants often come
Mm,
from the sea, and we can see the sea as a kind of a border between
mm,
worlds
mhm,
as well. That we always kind of wonder what is beyond the sea. I mean, especially in the past when people actually didn't know what is beyond the sea, that there was always that kind of curiosity that what is out there in the great unknown.
mm.
Like, yeah, and of course, us with people, curiosity is one of our big qualities as well. So yeah, that really adds the uh, themes of the film, and especially now when we think about it in retrospect, because lots of the immigration debate is about the Mediterranean Sea and people coming
Mhm.
to Italy and Greece and these countries from like North Africa and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, I think you say it like really well, that it is this combination of things. Like, one is there the sense of wonder, and to have something that helps you create that, um, and being an ode to all those things that help us do that, right? Like him being a poet, so words. Wow, like I think, yes, like if once we're discussing, there's so many layers, so it's sometimes to take each layer out, because it's so seamlessly put together in an experience that is this film. But then there are so many layers, right? And so things that bring us wonder and awe, and then things that also bring us in terms of trying to connect amongst human beings, because there's that whole thing about, the poet who's paying for words and is not from is in Italy but is from Greece and wants to write poetry about his homeland in his home language but doesn't know it and has to learn it, and so many of these things, like you said, that connect with the whole nomadic aspect of humanity and culture. Like we don't we are not fixed and we don't stay fixed, and that can also be very interesting in terms of even the history of literature and culture between Italy and Greece, because yes, it's like kind of started in Greece, and then it got inspired the movement in Italy, and so the rich historic connection between those two countries in terms of forming a lot of this initial Western culture, as we refer to it. Um, yeah, you're right, and how that ties to immigration and stuff, and moving things versus borders, like you said, and then artificial borders, the fence. Um, Interesting, very interesting.
And I think a running theme in Angelopoulos' works is the exploration of the Greek kind of national identity and history, and he often kind of discusses the, you could say, kind of the ideological battle between different factions and people in Greece. Like he has like one film that's about like a communist returning to Greece, and it's about him battling with his national identity and what he feels about his own country and things like that. And we can see a bit of these types of things in this film as well. And even the poet that the main character is inspired by, Diogenes Solomos or whatever his name is. Like I think he's like a very important 19th century poet in Greece, and I think he was even uh, like maybe like a national poet or whatever that. Or and I think I read somewhere that he contributed to the national anthem of Greece somehow or something like that. So he's a very important figure in Greece, and obviously people like that, those great artists of the past, are often a big part of the national identity as well. Like for example, in the UK, it would be Shakespeare, and in Finland, like Jean Sibelius, the classical composer, and things like that.
Mm,
These are always like very big part of our national identity, and I think it was like very kind of well thought out from Angelopoulos to put that figure in the film, and it really adds to that conversation. Yeah.
yeah, and that had a huge appeal for me to also learn, like you said, now these things not being familiar, it forces you to be a little more curious about these things, because we always talk about um, yeah, different, different things, and certain places that get the focus, but it's like to learn a little more about Greece beyond just the simple things we know about Greece, or to also understand, like you said, in a sense that its natural location being a place where, of course, you are going to get lots of cultural contact, because like you said, there's overland connection and then there's a sea connection where people can come through the sea and come through the land, and there's this, it kind of mirrors nicely the other thing that's going on, which is how do you really stop life? Like how do you stop life from in a way just passing, like time, the elusiveness of time, but how do you stop life from giving you these things? Like, I mean, there's a real, sad moment where he's going and visiting his mother, and you get this realization that he is going to potentially pass before his mother, and he knows it. And that that thing in life where you can't where he can't stop that, can he? Like he couldn't stop the lure of being a poet, that took him away from really connecting with the people in his life. And then he can't really stop this illness. And then he can't really stop this reality where it's like he's not going to be around to take care of his mother. And at the same time, the person who gave him birth, he's going to pass before that person. There's all this emotional complexity going on in this day. Um, yeah.
Now, of course, we see kind of how vast the scope of like human memory can be.
Mm,
That it like kind of even the word eternity, obviously, it is something huge in scope because it's eternal. It goes on forever. But that's often like we may be limited by borders and things in real life, but then in our brains we can kind of have like more kind of
mm,
full potential to live in a bigger scope and like through like a more you could say eternal way, like how we experience these like artworks and art forms and how we deal with our memories. Yeah, it's so huge and grand in scope when you really think about it, and that's what makes us human, that we have this capability to think and remember and things like that. But then also going back to the national identity a bit, like when you take a more historical perspective to it as well, that obviously back in the ancient times and like again these all these countries were kind of together because the borders of ancient Rome, for example, they were absolutely huge, like through most of Europe and North Africa and stuff. And then everything was more integrated together. But then after we got these nation states, we've um,
mm,
gotten these more kind of strict borders, and our human experience has in a way been limited more because everybody is in their own small place
mm,
inside their kind of very homogeneous cultures, and you cannot kind
mm,
of escape that border as well as back then when these countries were more integrated. But then through this immigration, we see how different national identities are starting to combine again, and everything is getting mixed. And of course, for a country that is used to that national kind of identity and that can be hard to come to grips with, that it's changing and stuff. So I think there is lots of themes like that as well here. So yeah.
yes, most definitely. Uh, Even with the idea of wonder, as you were talking about before, uh, if and I feel like this film is positing this idea that if if you don't have contact, there's two downsides. One is you don't have wonder, and you don't have humanity. I felt like one of the things in the film was that the only way we become human is that we feel and understand uh, other human beings, other cultures, other people around us. As soon as we go into a isolated state, and like you said, like there's the personal, and I think that's what's the crowning achievement of this film is the personal, and the larger like macro is merged together seamlessly. So it applies from the micro to the macro. So it's like this: if you don't if you just sit there and you just ignore what's happening, I don't know, just so many steps or miles or a few hours away from you, and what is actually going on and what is being suffered, and then when people escape that desperation to come, uh, if they're lucky to escape that at least, and come and then look for some kind of serenity or just look for love, like love and understanding, belonging or family, uh, and we don't engage with that as actual people, because I think this is the other haunting part of the film, its children, and it's a part we don't often think about in immigration. The children, it's always, full grown adults with like, oh, they're just coming in, but what about those kids, and what about those kids that come alone? So to be in that fragile state, I mean, there's so many heartbreaking moments, like the kids running around together, and we're in the spoiler section, so one of the kids dying, and them, oh my god, like they're just really, really, really deeply affecting and emotional moments that make you question this idea of artificial, in a way, fences and borders in our minds, in our hearts, but even on land, so we can keep these things at bay. However, the beauty is unifying all of that into the whole experience of life, and like you said, also realizing that as a whole, life has beauty despite all that, and everyone's searching for it, including that child that's just illegally crossed the border.
Yeah, and I think like if you think about the idea of like national pride, things like that, I think it's largely a kind of a facade. You are being proud of something that you just randomly happen to be born inside some artificial borders,
Mm.
and then like you are like, I'm so proud to be this, like even though you haven't achieved anything, you are just part, you are proud of something that just happened to be the case, and it's not an achievement. Like I often think about that how stupid kind of national pride is, even though I think, yeah, you can be a bit patriotic, that you support your country in sports and like your home cuisine and things like that.
Mm.
Like there's nothing
Mm.
bad about that, but when you really start having that kind of toxic pride in your nationality, and then you start putting down other people because of their nationality, it's just so toxic and stupid. But I was also gonna talk about the relationship between the kid and the man. I think I said in the plot synopsis that yeah, the man is trying to help the kid, but in the end it feels like the kid is helping the man
Mm.
more to kind of guide him through his memories and his life, and coming to grips with his uh, coming death that is coming like pretty much any moment now in the film, although it's a bit kind of unclear in the film. And I think in the kid there are some kind of, you could say, religious element there as well, because it feels
Yeah.
like like he could be, I don't know, like a Jesus type figure or a
Mm.
God type of figure, again guiding the man from this
Mm.
life to the next life, if there is a next life, and helping him in that way. And if you look at the kid, kind of how much he knows about
Mm.
everything, and he seems less so kind of intelligent and mature for his age. And by the way, the kid performance is really good. Obviously, it's hard to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
good
it's amazing.
performances from children, but both Bruno Gans and this kid are really, really good in the film. But yeah, again, I think there are maybe some religious things there as well.
Oh yeah, most definitely, either religious or the fact that he's a poet, and his kind of inspiration. So it's like his muse, almost like it's like the child representing possibility and wonder, and him being in a stage of life where it's end and decline and decay, or complete annihilation, in terms of physical form, and him finding, or him trying to figure out, not even figure out, but you're right, he does help him, because it's like him finding that just because the inevitable is close does not mean that life is not to be valued anymore. I think overall that's the kind of what their interaction brings about, but the flavor of it is incredible because you recognize the kid's situation. So there's this romance he almost has. Okay, this kid's going to go on a ship, and there are possibilities to his life, but one can also look at that as like you said, and it can be, has parallels with religion as well, or art, or anything, because it's like, yes, but realistically, what are his possibilities, right? He's like cleaning windshields, trying to collect some money. Now, if he goes on a ship and goes elsewhere, what is his reality going to be? So I think it does well to not actually tell us optimistically or pessimistically or realistically what his actual options are, and stops us at this point of what if, uh, because I think that is where the social conscience aspect is coming, where it's saying, imagine if you wanted it to be better for this child, what kind of world would have to exist? And in a way, we are affected by the world we create, because if we do this, we are losing the parts that bring the beauty to life. Um, at least I was gathering on about that, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I would add to that that okay, you mentioned again also that okay, the main character is a poet. That yeah, this is like a good example of poetic cinema. And of course, if you think about poetry, it's kind of like ordered chaos. It's
Yes.
stream of consciousness, but it has a certain order. Just like the events of this film, that it feels kind of chaotic, going from reality to memory, and from religion to reality, you could say also, and from life to death. But at the same time, it does that in a very ordered way. And of course, our memory as well. We get these memories, these events in a certain order, but in our minds can twist them around to make them more chaotic, even though there was a certain order in them.
Mm.
So I think this is a kind of good example of quote unquote poetic cinema. That's often kind of overused term, but this is like actually poetic cinema, and so
Yeah.
is the next film that we are going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's poetic cinema, and it's almost instructive because it helped me understand poetry more through the poetry that's going in the film, or the poetry he's struggling to create, or the poetry, like you said, in the film itself. Because poetry is actually a form I struggle with a lot. Uh, just like you said, because it's ordered chaos, it's stream of consciousness, so it's very, it's interesting because I'm a rap music fan, but like, so that's poetry too. So I don't know why, but certain forms of poetry I could never actually see what they are, and cinema actually has helped me a lot with poetry, because now I can actually read some poetry and really, um, like, submit or kind of disappear in that, and not, um, and just kind of experience it. And I have to give you a shout out in that, because even your most recent video where you were talking about, in the chat, we are talking about, different challenging cinema, or narratives that are difficult to decipher, and all that, and your ability to just, uh, or your, not even your ability, your interest in just wanting to be immersed in that despite not knowing what is going on, and just, pick up on feelings, and experiences that's generating in you. I think that is a kind of state we have to be in to appreciate poetry, which, I think, yeah, I always had struggle with, by always seeking too much structure, or too much understanding. Whereas in this film, getting back to this film, I feel like it almost instructs, like, you got to understand where poetry comes from. It's almost showing you where poetry comes from. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, this is where poetry comes from. It's like observation and longing all at once. Like, you could be sitting there, standing in an ocean, and real life is happening, and part of your consciousness is there, and part of your consciousness, I don't know, might be pulled by the way the sky looks today, or a bird passing, or the struggles of someone you've seen. Like, like that.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me of us like talking about some other films where we again talked about kind of again the idea from Aristotle's Poetics that fantasy and that type of thing often tells us more about reality than realism. So it kind of
Yeah,
applies to this film as well, that these kind of more fantasy type of elements and the ones that explore our stream of consciousness and memory tell us more about human life than if this was just bone dry realist film about immigration. Although again, it mixes that poetic side with kind of more banality and dryness, but then when you put those two things in conversation with each other, we get this kind of end result that tells us so much about both life and politics. So yeah.
yeah, with life and politics, and you're right. It's like it's almost understanding that it's giving the film attempts to give voice to voiceless things, right? Like you're absolutely right. That of course this film could have been made as a very literal seeming, or where it's just a man and he's sitting there and he's really sick, and you can visibly just see his illness, and he's just he's just struggling, and he's on the verge of his death, and his day to day. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but like you're saying, there's your point about a religious aspect, a spiritual aspect. There's a transcendence, right? We are going to go above the just literal physical ailment he has, and really go into this hallucination. It's almost like it feels like it, right? It feels hallucination as he's going in this odyssey, and he's just going around everywhere from place to place, and he's trying to figure it out in his mind. And then as a result of that, he's going into so many different places. And then the one thing that brings him into the present, like you said, is a child again. The child kind of makes him aware again, because up till now he's just maybe thinking, oh, okay, what did I lose, and my regrets and all that. And then the child represents a kind of presenceness. He brings them to the ever present. So that bus ride is that the ever present. He's just sitting there, and he's just experiencing the goings on the bus with this child. But one could also say with a child's sensibility. It's like he's now able to see it again through the child's eyes, and now he's thinking about the wonder, and the beauty, and the curiosity, and the strangeness of it all, and the diversity and the variety and everything. And he's overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed by this experience that is life.
Yeah, and these very universal themes about life, death, and love, those are you could say, the building blocks of poetry and literature. That's where we have all kind of built this huge canon of art, those universal themes, and then what kind of then add to those individual parts to those universal themes, and then that's what makes art so beautiful, that it is about real life, but it kind of gives us this more fantasy element, kind of idealistic version of it. And this film, like really, when we see the memories, it kind of can really make you think about your own life as well, that maybe you should be more present with your loved
Mm,
ones. Maybe you shouldn't just be in your own head focusing on your like intellectual endeavors and your work and things like that, but you should focus your life to again to your loved ones and to being human instead of being a machine. Because we see that from this character that he is kind of like a workaholic poet, that yeah, he lives in his poems and in his world,
mm,
and but he has these kind of unfinished projects, and
mm,
of course life is kind of unfinished, that
mm,
we are never fully satisfied, but it's more that melancholic vibe, that there are good things and there are bad things, there are satisfying things, but then there are those depressing things that we cannot let go of. And even our memories, our brains, like they are never unfinished, even after like you have an event, then it becomes a
Mm.
memory, but then your mind twists that memory into other things when you grow older, and you think that you remember something as it was, but as we know from
Mm.
psychology, our brain twists those
Mm.
memories often to be something maybe more negative depending on our brain, or you might have a more positive outlook about something that wasn't as positive as you thought. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because our brain searches for a narrative, so it's going to interpret things in certain ways so we can fulfill that narrative, so we can, deal with the dissonance that's life, because it's these conflicting things going all at once. Uh, but one thing I is still curious, and I think maybe it shows his how unresolved he might be in his brain, is that so you have that scene again where the family is like, you know, in it's a day of joy. They're coming together, after his child's born, everything like that, and then they are talking about, certain Greek constructions, like as in, poetic constructions or literary constructions. So there is that aspect of timelessness of art, or great art, or great poetry, great literature, and its ability to not only form identities but become part of people's lives, and people continue to live with them, with those um, examples or analogies, or forming culture. So how do you feel like he doesn't necessarily feel it's one or the other, like as in there's this conflict that, okay, if he didn't go into the world of poetry, he'd be with his family more, but if he was with his family more, then he doesn't get to give something of beauty to the world, or participate in the creation of beauty and meaning for the world. Because even for the child, that example of the poet buying words gave inspiration to the child.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether he ever comes to any type of conclusion. In a way, it feels like a kind of constant dialectic in his mind, going back from his intellectual work life and the family. And I think that's our like good example of our brain, when we have these constant inner conflicts that are never
Mm.
resolved, but it's all about the process, and it's never about the end result.
Like
And of course,
if I asked you a fun question and I said, would you rather in your life make stalker, or spend a lot of present time with your family?
well, for me it would be stalker, I guess.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
see, I think no, not to put you on the spot, but yeah,
yeah.
that's what that goes to the natural question, right? Like, what would you rather do? What is a life better spent?
Yeah, but if I had an ideal life of having like a beautiful wife or husband or something, yeah, then it might be a bit different. But yeah, with my
But
current
still,
family, then yeah,
I don't think you can be sure of that either. I think we say that, and then when it's there, and then if you have the ability, then it's also a burden, right? Like he, in a way, he is mourning certain things, but there's certain things very inspiring about him, right? Like he's able to remove himself from the daily concerns of everybody and go up the mountain and just see the beauty of the landscape, and then also it be able to move him to words and expressions that when people read, it's going to make a difference to their lives, or could make a difference to their lives, or could help them express something they don't know how to express. So it's like this burden of of the poet. At the end of the day, it's like you're trapped between these two things. Like, how do you really choose between poetry and life?
Yeah, and to be fair, I've often have these fantasies of like if I could just move to a log
Yeah,
cabin in the woods and kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
not deal with any kind of normal people who love
yeah,
adventures and Taylor Swift and don't yeah, engage with art and who have awful political views and stuff. Yeah, I often talk with Tony that if we could just move to a deserted island and ignore everything.
yeah.
But yeah,
If you could have your Rock Hudson from All That Heaven Allows, who built you that lovely cabin away from
yeah.
people, so you could live society and just, in a pureness, and be closer to things. We like to think of it like, oh, you're farther away from things, but I don't know. I heard it expressed to me in an opposite way, where it's like you're actually closer to things. You're closer to things that are uh, more relevant. It's almost like when once we're in our little closed societies with fences and all that stuff, we think those are the big concerns, and that's reality. But that reality is pales in comparison to actual reality.
And I think if I had the log cabin and it had a huge library and of
Yeah,
both books and films and I had an access to music and things like that, yeah, I would be quite
yeah.
satisfied.
Bergman Island. You want Bergman Island too,
Yeah,
and then every day at 2 you can have your coffee and watch a film in your own theater,
yeah.
just with your own thoughts, like the great Ingmar Bergman.
And I think even Truffaut had this quote that I'm gonna paraphrase now that he would be fully satisfied if he had great films, like that if he could watch a couple of great films a day, read a few great books a week, and have great records of music. That's all he needs. And yeah, I mean that's pretty close to
Yeah,
me. I
life
would
of
say.
pure inspiration, life of pure inspiration. Yeah, yeah,
But of course, this film shows that we often realize these things what we want when we don't have the free will anymore to do anything about them. It's when we are at the end of our life. That's when we realize these things, and that's when we have regret, and that's obviously just very tragic that you cannot alter your past, and that kind of relates to the next film we are going to talk about. That yeah, you can think, could I
mm,
alter my past if I time traveled
mm,
back in time or whatever? But it
mm.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I think in this film, uh, I really connect with the ending. I think the ending is beautiful. Um, his realization that exactly what you're saying. If you have one more day to live, why sit in a hospice or whatever waiting for death, right? Just live another day, right? Like I said, like put on a few, like it's one of those things. What would you do if you had just one day or you had one more day? And I think that's what we're saying right here. It's like watch a couple of great films, listen to some great music, and if that's the end, that's the end. And if it's not, you live another day. So eternity in a day. Like you could spend an eternity doing that, but in it, every day there's the eternity, there's the eternal, and you can experience it. And I think that's what your channel is all about. At the end of the day, isn't it? Even though it gets seen as some kind of snob, pretentious thing going on, but it's not really that. It's actually a deep reverence and appreciation for uh, yeah, these things that actually can bring meaning to our lives.
And this might sound a bit morbid, but I actually often think what would be the ideal way to die if you could choose like how you
Yeah,
die. But I've thought that yeah, laying in the bed, listening to my favorite album of all time, that's very hypnotic and stuff, and then just going through the some memories one more time, and maybe you have a loved one who's kind of holding your hand and letting you go and stuff. And
yeah. I think I'll just. I tell my wife too. I think dying in the middle of a great movie, you're just watching a movie, and then you just like you sometimes doze off to sleep like that.
I mean, I know you haven't seen the HBO show 6 Feet Under, but the ending of that show is all about this, and that would be a great way to die to see that.
Yeah, that is on my list to actually start that show. We're rewatching Mad Men right now, but we are. I think next week there's the I'm gonna watch.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
But
interesting.
maybe we should start wrapping this up. It was a nice hour-long conversation, and it went way better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, same, same.
As I told this to Altes before we started, that I was a bit distracted when I watched this a couple of days ago because I got some phone calls, and then I was a bit annoyed when I was watching it. But yeah, it ended up going well anyways.
Yeah, what an interesting thing to happen while watching this film. Your life was like paralleling the film in a way.
Yeah. And I had two emotions again, the annoyance and a bit of anger, but then also the awe-inspiring feeling when you watch these films.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we will probably return to Angelopoulos in the future of the podcast. I mean, he has a good-sized filmography, and I appreciate all the films, even the ones that I had some trouble with, and I have many favorites from him, like The Weeping Meadow and Ulysses Case and Alexander the Great. So maybe we'll do one of those sometime in the coming months. We'll see.
Yeah. That would be great.
But yeah, in the next episode, we are going to talk about Pastoral to Die in the Country. And I actually didn't realize this when I chose these two films to be a pair, but they actually share certain things
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
together. And actually, both of the directors were even born in the same year of 1935. So,
What do you know? Wow. Okay.
but look out for that. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.